I knew something was wrong the moment the plant sighed. Not rustled, not bent in the wind, but actually sighed like a man who had just woken from a decade of restless sleep. Either I was losing my mind, or the universe had finally decided to prank me directly. It happened on the kind of quiet California morning where the sun was too gentle and the air too still, like the world was holding its breath. I stood on the back porch of my small rental house outside Santa Cruz, staring at the fern I had bought 3 days earlier from an eccentric vendor at a weekend street fair. At the time, it looked like any ordinary plant. Now, it sat in its clay pot as though contemplating existential dread. That should have been my first warning. But the real shock came when the fern, instead of continuing to be a fern, dissolved into a spray of soft light. I fell backward into a pile of gardening soil I had forgotten to put away, heart thrashing in my chest. The light gathered, condensed, and stretched upward until it formed the silhouette of a man. A real man. A breathtaking man. He appeared barefoot on my deck with hair that looked like paintbrush bristles softened by rain, and eyes so warm and deep they could have been carved from old violin wood. His sweatshirt was oversized, dusted with dried colors like he had stepped straight out of a studio mid-inspiration. For a full 5 seconds, neither of us moved. I stared at him. He stared at me. The world felt like it had slipped sideways out of reality. Finally, he whispered, voice hoarse and melodic at once. "So this is sunlight." I would love to tell you that I reacted with grace, or maybe even quiet awe. Instead, I choked on my tongue and blurted, "Dude, what the hell?" He tilted his head, genuinely confused, as though language itself was a puzzle he was still learning to solve. "What the hell? Is that a greeting?" I scrambled upright, brushing soil off my jeans. No, it is not a greeting. You were a plant. You were literally a plant like 5 minutes ago. I watered you." He blinked. "You did." Then he smiled. And Jesus, if sunlight could smile, it would look like that. It warmed something behind my ribs that had been cold far too long. "I am Arlo," he said softly. Of course he had a name. Why wouldn't the magically manifested plant man have a name? "I am Noah," I answered, because reflex did the talking for me. "And I think I'm hallucinating." Arlo took a hesitant step toward me as if testing how legs worked. He studied his hands, turning them in the light. "I do not think you are hallucinating, Noah. At least I hope you are not. That would mean I do not exist. And I think I very much want to exist." His voice trembled on that last word, and something in me, something tired and quiet and lonely, stirred in answer. But before I could ask literally any of the 1,000 questions that had begun piling up in my mind, Arlo stumbled. His knees buckled, and he reached for the railing, missing it completely. I lunged forward, catching him with both hands. He fit strangely perfectly against me. Not heavy, not light, just warm. Ridiculously warm, like he remembered the sun even when he wasn't touching it. "Arlo," I said, guiding him down to sit on the deck. "Are you okay? Is this normal for people who used to be plants?" I can't believe I just said that. He let out a shaky breath. "I am tired. I think my body is new. I am not used to having bones or lungs or—" He looked down at himself like he was cataloging parts. For some reason, that made my throat tighten. I crouched in front of him, gentle instinct overriding panic. "Hey, we'll figure it out. Okay, but we should get you inside before a neighbor sees you, and I have to explain why a half-dressed man materialized on my porch." Half-dressed, he looked down at the long sweatshirt he wore. "Is this wrong?" "No, I'm the one who's wrong," I muttered, dragging a hand over my face. "Fine, I'll get you some clothes. Just sit here. And please don't turn back into a fern while I'm gone." He laughed softly. "I will try." Inside the house, I grabbed the first pair of sweatpants that came to hand, returned to the porch, and found him staring at the sky with a wonder so raw it hurt a little to watch. "You really like the sun, huh?" I said. "Feels like an old friend," Arlo murmured. "Like something I missed without knowing I missed it." I swallowed. "Okay, here, pants. Try them." He attempted to stand again. His knees wobbled. I caught him around the waist without thinking. His breath hitched. Mine did too, for reasons I refused to examine. "Sorry," I said quickly. Do not be, he whispered. And suddenly I was far too aware of the way he was looking at me. Like I was sunlight too. I led him inside. My little home was nothing special, but Arlo moved through it like every object held a story. He touched the back of the couch like it might sing. He traced the edge of a bookshelf as if it were a sculpture. He paused at the window, staring at a passing car with fascination. Do all things move like that here, he asked. Cars, yes. People drive them. Drive. As in guide them, yeah. He grinned like this was the best thing anyone had ever invented. How incredible. I had to suppress a smile. Okay, so Plant Man was basically a golden retriever in human form. Great. That made this whole situation slightly less terrifying. Hungry, I asked. He frowned thoughtfully. I have no memory of hunger, but I would like to learn it. That sentence shouldn't have made my heart twist. But it did. I pulled leftover pasta from the fridge and microwaved it. Arlo sat at the dining table in a posture too proper for someone wearing my old sweatpants. Watching me like cooking was an enchanted ritual. When I placed the bowl in front of him, he sniffed it curiously before taking a tentative bite. His eyes widened. Noah, it is warm, and soft, and tastes like something wrapping around something else. He took another bite, like a story on the tongue. I laughed unexpectedly. That might be the most poetic description of mediocre pasta I've ever heard. Poetic, he repeated softly, as though testing the word. I like that. I'm starting to notice, I said. He kept eating, clearly delighted, and for a moment, watching him filled my chest with something dangerously close to joy, which was ridiculous. He was a plant who had turned into a man who looked at me like I had rescued him from something unnamed. And maybe that was exactly what made it dangerous. By afternoon, the sun had risen high, flooding my small kitchen with golden warmth. Arlo sat across from me on the floor, legs folded neatly beneath him, looking more human with every passing hour. The sweatshirt hung off one shoulder now, exposing a lean line of collarbone that I tried very hard not to stare at. Tell me more, he said suddenly. About what? Everything. I blinked. Like, everything, he nodded earnestly. Everything you know. Everything you feel. Everything that makes this world make sense to you. I rubbed the back of my neck, suddenly aware of how quiet my life had been before him. Look, Arlo, I'm not exactly the best teacher here. I'm just a guy who works at a hardware store and waters questionable plants. He smiled, a slow, warm thing that made my stomach do a traitorous flip. Noah, you brought me to life. I felt the words slam into my ribs. That is very dramatic. True. I looked away. You don't know that. He tilted his head. Do you think someone else could have done it? I chose you. I froze. Chose me how you were a fern. I bought you for $12. Maybe it was not the money. Maybe it was the hands that carried me. I swallowed hard. Arlo, don't say things like that. Why? Because you make it sound like I'm important. You are. I shut my eyes for a moment. He didn't understand. He couldn't. People like me didn't get called important. They got overlooked, underestimated, or used until someone brighter came along. Arlo watched me quietly, his expression softening. Noah, do humans often fear being seen? I let out a slow breath. Yeah. Some of us do. He studied my face. I do not fear being seen. Not by you. I opened my mouth. Closed it. There was nothing I could say to that without letting him in farther than was safe. But then he reached out, fingers brushing my wrist, light as a breeze. Noah, he whispered. If you are afraid, I will wait. I am learning. I can learn slow. Something in me cracked gently, like ice melting. I looked at him, really looked, and for a moment the world around us seemed to fade. Evening rolled in with soft pink shadows. Arlo wandered through my backyard barefoot, stepping across the grass like it was sacred ground. The air smelled like jasmine and earth baked warm by the sun. I leaned on the back door frame, arms crossed, watching him with a mixture of fascination and unease I refused to name. He kept discovering small wonders. A ladybug crawling across his knuckle, the wind tugging at his hair, the sound of distant children playing. He turned toward me, smiling as though the entire sky was something to celebrate. Noah, the world is so alive. Yeah, I said quietly. It is. He walked toward me. But then his smile dimmed, replaced by something heavier. But I do not know why I am here. I straightened. What do you mean? His fingers fidgeted together. Nervous. I remember being a seed, then a plant, growing, reaching toward the sun. But I also remember. He closed his eyes. Colors, brushes, music, a name whispered in the dark. Promise, and pain. Deep, deep pain. A chill ran through me. Arlo, I think someone made me, he whispered. Or someone lost me. My breath caught. You think you were human before, I don't know. But something inside me feels broken. And I don't know what piece is missing. He looked up at me, eyes shimmering with something raw. I am scared, Noah. The admission hit me like a punch to the chest. Without thinking, I stepped closer and placed a hand on his shoulder. He leaned into the touch instinctively, like contact was the only thing keeping him grounded. It's okay, I murmured. We'll figure it out. Together. He exhaled shakily, pressing his forehead to my shoulder. For a moment we simply stood there, the world slipping into a hush. I didn't hold him, not at first. But then his breath hitched again, a soft, fragile sound, and I couldn't stop myself. I wrapped my arms around him slowly, carefully, like he might crumble. He melted into me with a quiet relief that almost hurt to feel. Thank you, he whispered. For what? For not letting me be alone in this world. My throat tightened. You're not alone. The words were simple, but I meant everyone. He pulled back just enough to meet my eyes. His hands slid up to cradle my cheeks gently, his touch warm and grounding. You have no idea how bright you are, Noah. And I couldn't breathe. If you want, he said quietly, I can show you something. Show me what? Instead of answering. He walked toward the potted fern that remained on my deck, the one he had emerged from. He touched one leaf that had been left behind, and it glowed faintly under his fingers. The air shifted. You asked what I was, he murmured. Maybe this is part of the answer. The leaf lit brighter, then dimmed again, but not before the air rippled like a held breath. I stumbled a step back. Arlo turned to me, eyes soft. I am tied to life, to growth, to creation. But I do not know why someone would make me like this or what I was meant to do. Then he looked at me with an intensity that pinned me in place. But I know I was meant to find you. My heart thudded violently. Arlo, I do not say this to frighten you, he added gently. Only to tell you the truth. When I woke, the first thing I felt was you. Not the sun. Not the wind. You. My breath broke. That's not how things work, I said, voice unsteady. You can't just choose someone like that. Maybe you are right, he admitted. But maybe some things choose for us. He stepped closer. One more step and the space between us disappeared entirely. Noah, he said softly, do you want me to stay? My answer rose instinctively, fierce and immediate. Yes. But I swallowed it. Fear, old and familiar, clawed its way up. Arlo watched me, patient and unbearably tender. You can say no, he whispered. You can always say no. God, he was gentle. Too gentle for this world. Too gentle for someone like me. But when I finally found my voice, it came out thin and true. I don't want you to go. Arlo smiled, small and luminous. Then I will stay. And for the first time in a long, long time, I felt the world shift into something that didn't hurt to hope for. Night settled over the house like a soft blanket, warm and quiet, the kind of quiet that made every small sound feel intimate. Crickets hummed in the grass. The wind whispered against the windows. And somewhere inside all that stillness, Arlo's presence filled the space like a candle that refused to go out. We were sitting on the living room floor, backs against the couch, a blanket draped loosely over us because the air had turned cool. Arlo kept adjusting the blanket like he was still trying to understand what being cold meant and why humans fought it so desperately. Does it always feel like this at night? He asked suddenly. Like what he considered the question, eyes on the shadowed ceiling. Like the world is smaller, softer, like everything outside fades and only what is close to you matters. I swallowed. Yeah. Nights can feel like that. He turned his head to look at me, his hair brushing his cheek with a kind of effortless grace. Noah. Do nights always feel like they are holding secrets? I huffed a small laugh. You're really poetic, you know that. He smiled faintly. Or maybe I just noticed too many things. No, you noticed the right things. I didn't mean for my voice to sound that gentle. But it did. And Arlo heard it. He always heard everything. He shifted slightly closer, like it was instinct, like proximity itself soothed him. I could feel the warmth radiating off him, a constant reminder that he was alive and real, and somehow here on my floor instead of existing as a quiet fern in a pot. Noah, he said softly, what did your nights feel like before I came? The question caught me off guard. I stared at my hands, picking at the edge of the blanket. Empty, I admitted. He didn't say anything, just watched me with those warm brown eyes that held too much compassion for someone who barely knew how to be human. They felt empty, I repeated, like I was walking through the world with no one really seeing me, like everyone else got something I didn't, or didn't deserve. Arlo shifted closer until our shoulders touched. The contact was brief, hesitant, but grounding in a way I didn't know I needed. I see you, he said quietly, and God. Those 3 words felt heavier than anything else he'd said all day. I cleared my throat, suddenly too aware of the fact that I hadn't had this kind of intimacy, emotional or otherwise, in years. Maybe ever. You should sleep, I said, softening my tone, so it didn't sound like I was pushing him away. You had a big day. You became human. That's gotta be exhausting. He blinked. Humans sleep? Yes. Like turn off the body, rest, recharge. His expression brightened. Oh, like plants resting during winter. Sort of. He nodded slowly, as if filing that information away. Then, a beat later, he whispered, will you stay near me while I do it? The question hit me deeper than I expected. You mean, sleep next to you? No. Just close enough so that if I wake, I am not alone. Something inside my chest softened like clay warming in the sun. Yeah, I said, I can do that. Arlo's entire face relaxed with quiet relief. Thank you. We set up a makeshift bed on the living room floor since I only had one actual bed, and the thought of suggesting he take my room while I slept on the couch felt wrong. Too distant. Too cold. And I didn't want distance. Not with him. He lay down on the blankets, curling slightly on his side. I watched as he traced the texture of the quilt with curious fingertips. This is so soft, he murmured. Softer than anything I remember. I sat beside him. That's because it was made to be comfortable. He looked up at me with an innocence that wasn't childish but pure, like he was seeing comfort for the first time. Humans make things to be gentle, that is, beautiful. Not always, I said quietly, but sometimes. He kept his eyes on me, warm and steady. I think you do. I swallowed hard. Okay, you should sleep now. He nodded once, trusting me far more than he should, and closed his eyes. His breathing settled slowly, shifting from uncertain to peaceful. His body relaxed, shoulders sinking into the blankets. Watching him fall asleep felt strangely intimate, like witnessing something sacred. I lay beside him but not touching, leaving space he could cross if he wanted to. The room was dim, shadows stretching softly across the walls. Arlo's breathing evened out completely, slow and warm. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel the weight of emptiness pressing against my ribs. I closed my eyes, and sleep came easier than it had in years. I woke to warmth. Not the kind sunlight gives, but the kind a person radiates. When I blinked my eyes open, I found Arlo curled closer than I remembered, his forehead resting lightly against my shoulder, one hand loosely gripping the fabric of my t-shirt like he had reached for me in his sleep. His breathing was soft, deep, rhythmic, peaceful, and God help me, the sight of him like that made my heart stutter. I stayed still, watching him, trying to understand how I could feel this protective over someone who had technically not been a human being 24 hours ago. His hair fell across his face in dark waves. His lips were slightly parted, his expression open and gentle in a way people rarely were when awake. He looked almost breakable. Noah. His voice was a whisper, thick with sleep. His fingers moved slightly against my shirt. You are warm. I swallowed. So are you. He opened his eyes, slow and heavy, like waking was a delicate act. When his gaze focused on me, he smiled a sleepy, soft smile that damn near knocked the breath from my lungs. "Good morning," he whispered. "Good morning. Is this what waking feels like when there is someone next to you?" "Not usually," I admitted. "But maybe it should be." He hummed quietly, a soft content sound. "I like it." I looked away before my chest could crumble under the weight of how genuine he was. "Come on," I said, clearing my throat. "Breakfast." "Breakfast," he repeated, brightening immediately. "The meal after sleep." "Exactly." He sat up, stretching his arms above his head, the sweatshirt riding up slightly to reveal a sliver of skin. I forced myself to look at literally anything else. He glanced around the room, taking in the morning light pouring through the windows. "Everything feels different today," he said softly. Different. How he placed a hand over his chest. "Here. It feels full." I didn't trust myself to respond, so I stood and headed toward the kitchen. Arlo followed close behind, steps light and curious as always. I made toast and scrambled eggs, simple stuff, but he treated it like a masterpiece, describing each bite like a culinary revelation. "Noah, this one tastes like warmth," he said, holding up a piece of toast. "That's exactly what toast is." He grinned. "Then I like toast very much." A laugh escaped me before I could stop it. He looked proud of himself, like my smile was a prize he'd earned. We spent the morning exploring the house. He asked about everything: the refrigerator, the lamp, the faucet, the washing machine. He stood in front of the mirror for the longest time, browsing his own reflection with a mixture of wonder and hesitancy. "That is me," he whispered. "Yeah." He touched the glass. "Why do I look like this?" I hesitated. "I don't know. Maybe you looked like this before you changed. Before I was a plant." "Yeah." He studied his reflection again, expression unreadable. "I feel like I used to know this face, but I do not." A heaviness settled between us. I stepped closer. "You don't have to force yourself to remember. You can figure out who you are now." He looked at me through the mirror. "And who do you think I am now?" The answer was instant, quiet, honest. "Someone gentle. Someone curious. Someone good." Arlo turned fully toward me, eyes glassy with an emotion that looked too big for his new human body. "Noah," he whispered, "I want to be good. For this world. For you." I felt that. Deeply. "You already are." Later, we walked to a small cafe near the edge of town. The sun was bright, the ocean air drifting in from the distance, carrying salt and warmth. Arlo looked around like every passerby, every storefront, every sound was a miracle. He trailed behind me sometimes, stopping to observe tiny flowers growing out of sidewalk cracks. "Even the forgotten things grow," he murmured. "Even the things no one sees." I had no idea if he meant himself or me. At the cafe, we sat outside. I ordered for both of us because he didn't know what anything was yet. When the waitress delivered 2 iced teas and a plate of waffles, Arlo gasped softly like she had handed him treasure. "This world is so generous," he whispered. I huffed a laugh. "Wait until we get the bill." He tilted his head. "The bill, the price." "Oh, humans exchange value for value, yes, yeah." He considered that. "I do not know what my value is." The sentence punched through me like a fist. I reached across the table without thinking, fingers brushing his briefly. "Arlo, you don't have to earn existing." He stared at our touching hands like the gesture was more important than the words. "But I want to," he said quietly. I didn't know how to respond to that, so I let silence hold the weight instead. We wandered the town afterward. Arlo tried on sunglasses at a small booth and admired how the reflections bent light. He picked up a seashell from a sidewalk vendor and held it to his ear, gasping when he heard the ocean whisper inside. "This world remembers everything," he said. "Even far-away places." "Yeah, guess it does." He smiled at me, brighter than the sun overhead. "Noah, I want to remember everything with you." The words hit hard. Too hard. But I didn't pull away. Instead, I said, "Then we will." When we returned home, Arlo wandered to the backyard again. The late afternoon sunlight painted him in gold, making him look almost unreal. I watched from the doorway as he knelt near the plants I kept meaning to take better care of. He whispered to them. Actually whispered, and the leaves shivered gently, like they knew him. "You talk to plants," I said softly from behind him. He looked back with a faint smile. "They talk back." "What do they say?" He brushed a finger across a leaf. "That it hurts to grow sometimes. But it is worth it." My throat tightened. He stood and walked toward me slowly, steps careful, deliberate. When he stopped in front of me, he lifted a hand but didn't touch my face, just hovered close enough for warmth to pass between us. "Humans hurt when they grow too," he whispered. "Yeah, we do. Does it get easier sometimes?" He lowered his hand. "Then maybe we can learn together." We stood there for a moment that stretched like soft light, long enough that the whole world felt quiet. And as the sun dipped behind the trees, casting us both in warm shadow, I realized something. He wasn't just learning how to live. He was teaching me how to, too. That night, something in the air felt different. Not heavy, not ominous, just full. Like the world had taken a long breath and was holding it gently between its palms. We sat on the porch steps, watching fireflies blink through the dark like tiny drifting stars. Arlo hugged his knees, chin resting on them, eyes bright with reflection more than the scenery. "Noah," he said softly, "what happens to someone like me in a world like this?" I glanced at him. "What do you mean, someone like you?" He hesitated, picking at a loose thread on his sleeve. "Someone who wasn't supposed to exist." The words were barely above a whisper. I scooted closer until our knees touched. "Arlo, you exist. That's enough." He breathed out, slow and shaky. "But existence is not the same as belonging." My chest tightened. I understood that too well, more than I wanted to admit. I tilted my head, studying his profile, the soft line of his jaw, the gentle curve of his lips, the quiet hope trembling underneath every question he asked. "Do you feel like you don't belong here with me?" He turned to me, and for the first time since becoming human, he looked afraid. Not of the world, not of himself, of the possibility that he wasn't allowed to want more. "I don't know what belonging is supposed to feel like," he said, "but when I am near you, I feel rooted, like everything stops moving too fast, like I can breathe." I swallowed hard. "That sounds like belonging to me." He blinked quickly, eyes glossy. "Noah, may I ask you something bold?" My heartbeat stuttered. "Yeah. Anything. Is it selfish to want to stay?" The question nearly broke me. I reached out and took his hand, my first time initiating. My first time letting myself admit what had been growing between us from the moment he opened his eyes as a human. Arlo stared at our joined hands like they were a promise. "You can stay as long as you want," I said quietly. "As long as you choose to." His lips trembled into a small, relieved smile. "Then I choose to." We sat there in silence, fingers intertwined, the kind of silence that didn't need to be filled. The fireflies kept dancing. The world kept breathing. And for the first time in my life, I felt like something beautiful had rooted itself inside me too. Over the next few days, our routines settled into something soft, easy, golden. We cooked breakfast together. Arlo insisted on cracking the eggs, even though he somehow always managed to get tiny shell pieces in the bowl. He would gasp dramatically each time he failed, then look at me for reassurance like a kid with paint on his hands. "You are learning," I told him every time. And every time, he brightened like I'd handed him the sun. We walked to town often. Arlo became somewhat of a local phenomenon, not because of anything dramatic, but because he radiated kindness in a way most people had forgotten how to. He complimented strangers with the sincerity of someone who truly saw them. "Your dog looks like a cloud," he told a woman walking her poodle. She cried. Actually cried. Full tears. He touched a scar on an old man's forearm and said, softly, "Your survival is beautiful." The man held his breath and whispered thank you like no one had ever said that to him before. Arlo didn't even realize what he was doing. He was just being him. That was the part that destroyed me most gently. And every night when we walked home, he walked a little closer. Our hands brushed occasionally, each time sending a quiet shock through my chest. But he didn't push. He didn't demand. He just stayed beside me, with me. And somehow that was enough to stitch pieces of me back together. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low and the world glowed amber, Arlo stood in the backyard, staring at the empty pot he used to call home. I approached quietly. "You okay?" He nodded slowly. "Yes, just thinking." About what he traced the rim of the pot with gentle fingers. About the things we leave behind when we grow. I moved to stand beside him. "Growth doesn't erase what you were. It just adds to it." He smiled softly. "You always know the right thing to say." I shrugged. "Only because you make it easy." He looked up, sunlight catching in his eyes like it was choosing to settle there. "Noah, I think I know what belonging feels like now." "Yeah, what does it feel like?" He stepped closer, close enough that his breath brushed my cheek. Close enough that the world narrowed again to just the two of us. "Feels like this." Before I could respond, he reached up and touched my face, his palm warm, gentle, reverent. I froze, but not from fear. From something deeper. Something I hadn't let myself feel in years. "Noah," he whispered, voice trembling. "May I kiss you?" My breath caught. God, no one had ever asked me like that. With care. With softness. With certainty and uncertainty woven into one. "Yes," I whispered. Arlo leaned in slowly like he was giving me time to change my mind. Time to breathe. Time to feel loved before it even happened. His lips touched mine with the gentleness of a falling leaf. A kiss so soft it felt like a question. A beginning, a promise all at once. I kissed him back, hands trembling as I cupped his jaw. His fingers slid into my hair, hesitant but wanting. Warmth bloomed between us, steady, quiet, profound. When we finally pulled back, he rested his forehead against mine. "Is this what love feels like?" he asked, voice barely audible. "Yeah," I breathed. "I think it is." He smiled, eyes shining with the brilliance of someone experiencing sunrise for the first time. "Then I want to keep learning it. With you." I exhaled shakily, my heart full in a way it had never been before. "You will. We both will." He nodded, threading his fingers through no hesitation this time. And as evening settled around us, soft and golden, I realized something simple and extraordinary. A plant had learned how to become human. And somehow, somewhere along the way, I had learned how to become alive. Together, we stepped back into the house, fingers laced, hearts steady. And for the first time in a long, long time, hope bloomed. Thank you for listening. If you find it interesting, please like and subscribe to follow the next stories.